Qatar has been ruled by the Al Thani family since the early 1900s, when it was controlled by the British. On July 17, 1913, Sheikh Abdullah bin Qasim Al Thani became the ruler of Qatar. At the time, Qatar's primary industry was pearling and fishing. The country at the time was dealing with widespread poverty, malnutrition, and disease from the collapse of the pearl trade in the 1920s. In 1939, oil was discovered in the city of Dukhan, but development on the field was slow until 1949 because of World War II. While the oil discovery was great, it was nothing compared to the natural gas reserve found 30 years later. In 1951, Qatar produced 46,500 barrels of oil a day, amounting to $4.2 million in revenue. The discovery of offshore oil fields led to an increase in production to 230,000 barrels per day. Then, Qatar began a slow modernization process. The country's first school, hospital, and power plant, and even telephone exchange all opened in the 1950s. Oil revenue steadily increased through the 1960s as the Al Thani family grew stronger by placing relatives in high government positions. However, oil production is not expected to remain at its peak levels of 500,000 barrels a day because of the oil fields are projected to be mostly depleted by the year 2023. But Qatar has natural gas reserves to compensate for that. Qatar's reserves of gas are the third largest in the world. Qatar's reserves are estimated to be at 896 trillion cubic feet. In the year 1971, the world's largest natural gas field, the South Pars North Dome gas condensate field, was discovered off the coast of Qatar. But the crash of the oil prices in the 1980s stopped the growth of the economy. By the year 1995, the situation in Qatar had not improved until Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani took power in a coup, and then Qatar became a very powerful force. Hamad saw that keeping a low profile could be dangerous and set a whole new direction for the country. So how exactly did Hamad raise Qatar's profile in the world? What he ended up doing was pretty big. So first, he let the US set up its regional military headquarters, the Al Udeid Air Base, outside the capital city of Doha. The partnership with the US military has given Qatar a new level of security. Hamad then went on to integrate Qatar into the global economy. He built the world's largest facilities for condensing liquid natural gas and began exporting liquid natural gas for the first time. Following that, over the past 15 years, 14 liquid natural gas plants have been built in partnership with international oil companies. In the late 1990s, Qatar entered in production sharing agreements with several international oil companies. And in 1996, for those of you who keep up to date with anything to do with the news, well, you probably know about this. Hamad launched Al Jazeera, which is a 24-hour news station that combined aggressive reporting, high production value, as well as an Islamic worldview. Al Jazeera became huge, and the purpose of this organization was really about enhancing Qatar's visibility as well as its influence. But the channel has gone on to be one of the most important broadcasters in the whole Arab world when it comes to news. Qatar's GDP has skyrocketed over the past 15 years thanks to steady oil production and high natural gas production. In regards to planning for the future depletion of its oil, well, Qatar has taken measures to diversify its economy. In the year 1998, the government built Education City, which is a huge campus that supports 6 American and 2 European universities, as well as research centers. Qatar has a sovereign wealth fund of $170 billion. Then in the year 2005, Qatar established the Qatar Investment Authority to recycle oil and gas income into other income streams. In other words, it was set up to buy a lot of things around the world and thus reduces the country's exposure to the oil price. In London alone, it owns Harrods, the Shard, the Chelsea Barracks site, the US Embassy, and the Olympic Village site, among many others. Now, another fact that may come as a surprise to many people is that Qatar is actually the safest country. This is according to the Numbeo Crime Index. In 2022, Qatar has actually maintained its position as the safest country in the world. There are many reasons to love Qatar, of course, from the amazing museums, art galleries, as well as the beach and parks, and the architecture is beautiful. But a major reason that people move there is because the fact is that it's a very safe country. Doha, Qatar, is ranked the second safest city in the world according to Numbio's Crime Index by City 2022 report. Here's another interesting fact for you guys. There are more men than women. According to the latest census figures from December 2020, men outnumber women in Qatar by about 3 to 1. With just 730,000 women in a population of 2.9 million people. In fact, Qatar has the highest male to female ratio in the world, with the worldwide average of male to female ratio standing at 101 males per 100 females. And this is according to the United Nations estimates. Traveling to Qatar, you will also see robotic camels. If you didn't already know, well, camel racing is very popular in Qatar, with races taking place at the Al Shahania camel racing track between October and February every single year. Originally, children would be used as jockeys for the camels, but for health and of course safety reasons, robots have been used since 2004. The robots are controlled by remote by the camel herders who often drive alongside the tracks. Fact number 2 leads us to Burj Doha. This is one of the most iconic structures that I think you'll ever see. Now, it was even named the best tall building in the world back in the year 2012. It was designed by the French architect Jean Nouvel, and this 46-story tower has some unique features that you might not have noticed. First off, the building has no central core and became the first skyscraper to use internal reinforced concrete diagonal columns, which blend in with the building's facade. Now, the facade itself, aside from being beautiful and a reference to the ancient Islamic design Mashribaya, it protects the building from the sun and varies in density around the building depending on where the sun actually hits it. Also, the building at night is very beautiful because it lights up. Ending this episode off at fact number 1. Hosting the FIFA World Cup. So of course now everybody knows this fact, but one of the most exciting occasions in football, of course, is the FIFA World Cup. This year, 2022, Qatar is the first Arab country to host this sporting event. And not only that, but it will likewise be the smallest country ever to host it and the only one to host it during the winter season. It also is reported that this is going to be the first ever carbon neutral World Cup, although there are some reports saying that that's not actually quite accurate. Okay guys, so I grew up speaking English, and to some people I may be pronouncing the word Qatar a bit differently than you are. But you see, all of the different pronunciations of Qatar you would say are correct, right? The word Qatar can be pronounced in several different ways. And some of the common ways of pronouncing it are Qatar, and then there's Qatar, 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 and Qatar. Really, when you go to different parts of the world, people pronounce it differently, but they're all correct, okay? And people in Qatar don't seem to mind. I don't hear them really complaining about the pronunciation, so they're all acceptable ways to pronounce it. So yeah, that wasn't really a fact, just kind of just some fun information. And also, I don't want to hear in the comment section, Leroy, you're pronouncing Qatar wrong. Yeah, I know sometimes my pronunciation sucks, guys. I get it, okay? Okay, so moving on, let's talk about the cities and districts in Qatar. The cities and districts are generally named after their geographical features. For instance, Doha means roundness, and it reflects the rounded bays that categorize Qatar's coastlines. Gualina means mother of Gulen, and Gulen is a kind of shrub that grows in that area. And also there's Umslai Ali, which means mother of rocks. If you ever visit Qatar, you'll probably notice that their weekend system operates differently. It's not Saturday and Sunday like here in North America and other parts of the world, but actually it falls on Friday and Saturday. So you can expect stores to be closed on Friday morning in observance of the afternoon prayer. When it comes to eating food in Qatar, so Qatar isn't the source of most of their food production. Actually, 92% of its food is imported. And the countries that they mainly import food from are countries nearby like Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Syria. And you know, some of Qatar's cuisine dates back to a few millennia. One of Qatar's most popular dishes is a pretty simple dish. It's haris made from wheat. It dates back to the 10th century, and it's documented in the Arabic text called the Cooking Book. There are even many claims and evidence of haris being a dish eaten during the time of the Prophet Muhammad in the 6th century. One thing also to know about Qatar, is probably one of the most common facts though, is that petrol is extremely cheap, guys. Since Qatar has the highest GDP per capita in the world, as well as being the biggest exporter of liquid gas in the world, the country's oil and gas revenues are a huge contributing factor to its GDP. So of course, for the local people, gas prices are super cheap, and I mean, you can fill up a tank of gas for 50 Qatari riyal. And currently, 1 Qatari riyal is worth 27 cents in US dollars. Another thing to note about the culture in Qatar is that most women from other Gulf countries say that they prefer Qatari men. The Qatari men are supposed to be gentle, romantic, and more caring. Now, I just had to throw this fact in here because recently the 2018 FIFA World Cup wrapped up, but guess which country is hosting the next World Cup in 2022? Yeah, Qatar. It will be the first Middle Eastern country to host the FIFA tournament. Now, due to the intense heat of the summers there, the World Cup won't be held in June or July as usual, but it would actually be held in November to December instead. Now, there are major preparations happening in the country, including 9 new stadiums being constructed right now. And did you know that Qatar is also the safest country in the world? Like, there was an article in the Telegraph that quoted that Qatar is the least likeliest country in the world to be struck by a natural disaster. So like the most that happened in Qatar in recent years are aftershocks of earthquakes in neighboring countries, as well as they had some sandstorms. But pretty much you go to Qatar, it's like a paradise. You don't really have to worry about anything. Okay, now the last set of facts about Qatar that I want to share with you is about the tallest building. Did you know that the tallest building in the world was going to be in Qatar until the project got cancelled? It was supposed to be a 1,808 feet tower in Doha, and it was set to become one of the world's tallest buildings. But there was just one problem. It was so tall that officials worried that it would make it tough for pilots landing and taking off from the new airport. Construction was halted until Doha's new airport was finished, until the project was abruptly cancelled anyway. For fact number 5, Russia was actually banned from these games. The country that hosted the 2018 World Cup has this year, of course, been banned by FIFA from international football competitions in response to Russia sending troops into Ukraine. Now, with Russian team being absent from the games hosted in Qatar, its fans instead had to come to support Russia's ally country, Serbia. Let's also talk about there being no alcohol. So Qatar pretty much changed its policy of selling alcohol to fans just 2 days before the tournament started. That was pretty last minute. And of course, people watch football/soccer and they have a beer and they have some drinks. But although according to BBC, alcohol was set to be served in select areas, despite its sale being strictly controlled in the Muslim country. I guess they didn't want fans getting too out of control in the games. For fact number 3, let's talk a little bit about some controversies. Now, Qatar has been surrounded by many controversy with regards to the World Cup in 2022. Firstly, it has been under public scrutiny after news circulated that around 6,500 migrant workers, including those from Pakistan, Nepal, India, Sri Lanka, as well as Bangladesh, they unfortunately lost their lives in the process of building the stadiums in Qatar. Other than that, Qatar's stance on the LGBT movement has sparked a lot of debate and controversy on international platforms. From there, let's take a look at fact number 2, BBC and the opening ceremony. The British media outlet BBC did not broadcast the opening ceremony. This, of course, was a surprise, It drew a lot of criticism. This is the first time that the BBC has not broadcast an international event happening on such a large scale. The TV host Piers Morgan said this in a tweet. Outrageously disrespectful to Qatar that the BBC didn't broadcast the World Cup opening ceremony and instead put out more virtue signaling guff about how awful it is. If they're that appalled, they should bring home their vast army of employees and spare us this absurd hypocrisy. So definitely, yeah, a lot of people had a whole lot to say about BBC's decision there. And Piers Morgan's voice happened to be the outlet for a lot of people that thought the exact same thing. Now, to end this episode off at fact number 1, this could be the last World Cup for Messi and Ronaldo. Yeah, this is definitely sad news for football/soccer fans globally, because this year's FIFA World Cup is likely going to be the last international tournament played by the football legends and arguably some of the best players in football/soccer history, Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. As a tribute to both football players, Louis Vuitton, they shared a photo of both players playing chess for the fans on its Instagram page, which left fans awestruck, and of course it went viral in just a few hours. So we'll see. Both of these football players are great. They have achieved everything. They just need World Cup championships under their belt. So let's see if any one of them are going to do it before they just call it quits and retire from international football playing.